Hi, I'm John Ficarra. Welcome to Ficarra Classic. Today we're going to do something a little different. We're outside the garage and we're going to take a look at some of my other cars that aren't German, that aren't 928s. And we're going to start this series with one of my favorites, this truck. This is a 1971 GMC C25 Stoner Ambulance, and it's awesome. Now, what the heck does that mean? So, back in the day, you could get what was the early version of the Chevy Suburban or the GMC Carryall, which is what this was. This was made in Fremont, California. It was sent down to Los Angeles to this company called Stoner, and they cut the roof off and they put on this fiberglass cap and ambulance. Now, these were really cool ambulances because they were the transition between the earlier station wagon ambulances and the modern van ambulances we have today. So it was kind of this cool little in-between period. And it also was the star of a TV show called Emergency that I was too young to really watch, but I know my mom had the hots for one of the guys on the show. So this in the back still has all its cool ambulance stuff, including the gurney named Dan. Get it? Dan Gurney, had to go there with that. And it's kind of fantastic. Now, you gotta ask yourself, why the heck did I buy an old ambulance? Well, this was going to be the vehicle that we raced in the 2019 C2C Express. And that was a fantastic Cannonball series put on by a good friend of mine and awesome dude, Ben Charlie Safari Wilson. And this was for the 2019, the last year he did it, and the biggest year he did it with the most vehicles. So he knew I was kind of on the fence. He knew I hadn't really found a vehicle yet. And so he sends me an ad for this. It was in a place called Sebastopol, which is north of San Francisco, about an hour, only a couple hours from me. Didn't have an engine or transmission, which is not a problem because I really didn't want the old engine and transmission. And he's like, come on, you got to do this. Now, I had already ran an ambulance in a Cannonball in 2013. I ran my version of the Transcon Medevac, which was the first ambulance ever to finish a Cannonball. Wasn't a perfect replica of the movie vehicle, but it was pretty awesome. So I knew ambulances were really, really cool. I kind of was like, okay, let's do the ambulance. I went and got it. The guy who had it had two of them, because if you have one, you have two. This was his parts vehicle, and we grabbed it. Now, I'm not going to go into all the details of the run because I do that in my VinWiki video. But I also will be doing a series of videos after this one on each of my 12 Cannonballs, starting with the first one in 2007. So I won't go into all the details of the 2019 run. What I want to show you today is the ambulance itself and how we built it and what we're going to do with it. So let's go around the front and start with what I did about the fact that it had no engine and transmission. Well, I thought that was actually a plus because what I'd always wanted to do, and actually I've never done surprisingly, is an LS swap. You always hear about LS swaps. Now, an LS was Chevrolet's or General Motors V8 go-to engine for the Corvette, and it was in the Camaro, and it was in trucks. So what I decided to do was find one from a truck, and we found a 2005 Cadillac Escalade that had been hit badly in the back, and I bought the whole truck because to buy the engine and transmission outside of the truck was almost as much as what it cost for the whole truck. And I figured, let's just get the whole truck and get all the parts off of it, because this didn't come with a radiator, engine, transmission, drive shaft. All that had been removed. And the reason for that was this was originally serviced up in Washington. It was for two different ambulance companies up there over the years. And then it was sold to a hot rodder in Idaho, I believe. And he wanted the 402 big block out of it for a project. So he gutted the driveline out of it. The guy I bought it off of, he just wanted it for parts, so he didn't care about that. He wanted the ambulance parts off of it. So the engine was gone, not a problem. We found an LS. This is an LQ9, which is the truck version of the LS, and it's a little over 300 horsepower, plenty for what we needed to do. Modern, fuel injection, so much easier than an old V8 with a carburetor on it. And guess what? It's one of the easiest swaps you can do. I still, to this day, all the engine swaps I've done, all the crazy stuff I've done with cars, this is one of the easiest things I've ever done. We went online and found a kit, literally just a bolt-on kit, bolts to this chassis, put the engine in, everything lines up. They've been done so many times before, they've got all the kinks worked out of it. And one of the great things about these chassis is you can take the whole front clip off, the fenders, everything, all comes off as one piece, and you just slide that engine in there. And mechanic Matt, who's behind the camera, hi Matt.
Hello.
Matt did an amazing job because we built this from the day we got the Escalade parked next to the ambulance. The whole thing was done and on the road to New York in 30 days because we drove it to the start and then literally like a day later turned around and raced it back to California. So the engine swap's so easy. We have the LQ9. Behind the LQ9 is the Escalade's transmission, which is a 4L65. Now everybody heard of the 4L60. They're like, it has 4 neutrals because they blow up all the time. And you're never gonna make it. Well, the 4L65 was a beefed up version of it. And a little benefit, side benefit was we had to convert it. It was from 4-wheel drive because the Escalade was a 4-wheel drive to 2-wheel drive. So while we had it out and open, we kind of changed a few things and updated some of the bands inside of it. And that was not a hard conversion to do. It was just the kind of tail section of the transmission was changed and we got that in there. Because this is a 2-wheel drive truck. Little geek fact, this is a C25. Now the C is what indicates 2-wheel drive. When you hear K, that indicates 4-wheel drive. And then the numbers, in Chevy terms, it was 10, 20, 30, and in GMC it was 15, 25, 35. So a 10 is a half ton, a 20 is a 3/4 ton, and a 30 is a 1 ton. So this is a 3/4 ton truck, which is great because we're going to be using it. Its new job after cannonballing is going to be for towing, and this thing can tow a bunch. Now we've got the engine, transmission, we had a drive shaft made, but we also took a lot of stuff off the Escalade, including the radiator and the overflow bottle, whatever we could get. The fun part was we had to get the throttle pedal out because the throttle on this is from the Escalade, and that is an electronic throttle. So it has a pedal and a little box where it kind of indicates to the computer how big to open the throttle up. It's not manual linkage, and which is, to me, was great because it was one step less of hooking up a bunch of linkage. The cool part was we unbolted it from the Escalade. We go underneath the dashboard of this truck, and there's 2 bolts there that line up with the same pedal. Like, they haven't changed the firewall in 60 years or something. I don't think that's true, but it was a little miracle that the thing kind of just bolted up to the firewall. We did have to cut it a little bit and move the pedal over to clear the center tunnel. But I mean, literally it bolted in, which was, those little miracles are so much fun when you get to do these conversions. So I highly recommend, if you're doing an LS swap, do it. So easy. Now, one thing we did have to worry about was that this is a fuel injected engine. It had a carbureted fuel tank. Now, what the heck does that mean? So for a carburetor, all a carburetor needs is fuel coming out of the fuel tank, being pumped up to the carburetor. It's pretty straightforward. And then you have the filler neck here and a vent so that as you displace the fuel, this air can move in and out so your tank doesn't expand or contract. And that's all it had in it. Now, fuel injection is different. Fuel injection sends the fuel out at a very high pressure, goes up to the engine, and in some of the systems, the fuel comes back to the tank. So this was that kind of system. So it had to return to the tank. There's nothing on this tank to allow the fuel to come back. The other thing is, fuel injection doesn't like to be starved of fuel. So usually you'll have a baffles inside of a fuel injected tank to keep the fuel when it's really low in the tank from sloshing away from the pickup and starving the engine. So this doesn't have baffles in it either. Now, we didn't have a lot of time to convert this tank or mess around with it. And so what I did was went out to the shed and got this. Now, what the heck is this? This may or may not allegedly been a fuel tank in our 24 Hour of Lemons Supra, a spare tank, what's called a surge tank, and it's a baffled tank that feeds the fuel injection. And in racing, when you're pushing into the corners, all the fuel has a tendency to shove to one side or the other, and that can starve the fuel going to the engine. What this does is it keeps the fuel all in one small space and keeps that from happening, so you can go through all kinds of cool corners. Now, we had this made so it fits in the spare tire well of the back of the Supra, and then we covered it with a sheet of aluminum, and you'd never know it was there. Not that we were cheating or anything, but this tank was made by a friend of mine, Mike Andrews, who worked at Canopy. He's a master fabricator, fantastically made tank. But you can see all the different bits on here, all labeled up. We've got a place for the fuel to come in, a place for the fuel to come out. We have what else have we got on here? We got, they go to and from the tank at the other tank, and then a vent so that we can have expansion of air inside. So how this worked, and it's not terribly confusing, is we had to have two fuel pumps, both external. So I had one fuel pump that pumped fuel out of this, it came out of here into a fuel pump and then filled this tank. Then once this tank was full, it came out of this tank to a high pressure pump, which sent it forward to the fuel injected engine. Then the fuel came back into this tank, and that was the circuit of fuel. So I had to have two fuel pumps operating all the time. What was a disadvantage to this was this had a fixed space right behind the rear axle. This just fit right behind it, up underneath the truck. And it left about 2 inches or an inch behind the rear bumper. Not the safest place for a fuel tank. So if we ever got in a rear end collision, my worry was it would get compressed and open up and explode. Not ideal. So we had to come up with a solution. Now that we're going to be using it a little bit more as a tow vehicle, I'm going to be putting my kid in it. I want to get rid of this whole contraption. Now, it worked flawlessly. It worked great. We raced out to the East Coast and back without one issue. This truck has been 100% reliable. So what I decided to do was move to just one single bigger tank. And what I did was we fabricated up a couple more crossbars because this tank is much larger, and we got a 31-gallon tank out of a K5 Chevy Blazer. And so it's got the same kind of dynamics and shape of the original tank, it's just a little longer. But what we did was, there's a really cool kit you can buy that will convert a standard old fuel tank like that into a fuel-injected fuel tank. And it's a drop-in fuel pump that falls right into it. You cut a hole slightly larger in the top of the tank. It comes with everything you need. You slide it in there, you seal it up, and then you have something that allows the fuel to come in and go out and vent, and it's all in one unit. And the best part was, instead of having two external fuel pumps going all the time, I mean, it was annoying. I've got the fuel pump now, single fuel pump, in the tank, surrounded by fuel, totally quiet. It's so glorious. And I also now have a good 1.5 feet between the back of the truck and the tank. Little more of a safety gap so I don't get a Pinto explosion going on in a rear end collision. So we've solved the tank, we got a lot more range coming out of it. So even if we're getting 15 miles a gallon, and we were getting 18 miles a gallon in this for a while. If we're getting 15 miles a gallon with a 30-gallon tank, we'll be able to tow anywhere. Now I'm putting a rear bumper on here. These are the new brackets we're test fitting. And what happened was, now this happens when you buy pattern parts that have been reproduced 1 million times and they're coming from China, and I didn't check, and this is my fault. This bracket actually curves out right at the end, and it's supposed to go up against a flush bumper. And what it did is it ended up denting my brand new fancy chrome bumper. Now I got rid of the Ambulance giant bumper. It was heavy, it was rusting, I wasn't gonna re-chrome it, I wasn't using the step. So I wanted to go to a clean, original bumper that would have been on a carryall. But here's what happened, is as we tightened down these bolts, it dented both sides, if you can see that dent, and ruined my bumper. And I'm just like, ugh. So I'm in talks with the company that made the bumper and bracket kit. Hopefully they step up and replace the bumper, otherwise I'll have to figure something else out. Another thing I want to show you that we changed were the wheels and tires. Now this thing originally came with 16.5-inch wheels, steel wheels, narrow tires. You can't get a good tire on a 16.5-inch. Most of those are like trailer-sized tires. And so what we did for the race was I just went on Craigslist and I found a set of Silverado wheels with general mud tires on them. We didn't have time to get tires. We didn't have time to do anything. So these mud tires were worn down to, you know, just the tread depth of a regular street tire. And I figured, oh, what the heck? I mean, they're really wide. They're, you know, we got limited tread, so not a lot of drag, and they'd have like 15 belts in them because they're mud tires. Let's just do it. Now the speed rating was like 108 miles an hour. But those tires, believe it or not, we drove both ways across the US, plus another 1,000 miles coming up California, coming home. Flawless, perfect, great. But I'm like, I'm not gonna rely on that. So I went out and I got a new set of wheels and tires. These, I wanted to kind of make the look of the original ambulance white wheels. These are wheels off of a Hummer H2. And I had them powder coated white, and a nice set of Continentals put on it. And it drives great. And plus it kind of has a kind of period look to it. What I'd love to do is find a dog dish cap that fit over this, but I don't think that's gonna happen. Now, I have to tell you, the driving quality of this truck is beyond anything I ever expected. It's actually nicer than my later 78 heavy half that I had, which I loved, but that had a leaf spring suspension. This doesn't. It was an option on the GMCs to have a trailing arm suspension. And the difference is this. So you have a leaf spring and the axle sits in the leaf spring like that, and it just goes up and down, straight up and down. The trailing arm got rid of the leaf spring, it had a coil spring. The axles sit on the end of this arm with a coil spring on top of it, and this long travel. And that long travel smooths out the bumps. It's like a limousine in the back of this thing. Now we replaced all the shocks and springs before we left, and it just drove great. But that trailing arm suspension was only available for a few years, and it's just fantastic. Smooth ride, wonderful truck. Now what I wanted to show you is the team that we did it with was, we had 5 guys in the back of this, and it was Yummy, the awesome solo runner, his son Elijah, me, my late cousin-in-law Joe Herman, may he rest in peace, and a documentarian from England named Dave Aspinall. And people always ask, because we picked him up literally, he hopped in the truck minutes before we left for the run because he wanted to film us running it. And Dave, come on, at some point we need to see the footage of us inside the truck for 37 hours and 6 minutes. That's how long it took us to go coast to coast in this thing. And this guy, this is for his craft. He sat here on this like 1 square foot box because we had 2 guys in the front, guy in the other chair, and in the gurney. And that poor guy sat here with his cameras and recording equipment and everything for 37 hours. Just fantastic. Again, Dave, I want to see the footage. We all want to see the footage. At some point, what we were doing inside this truck. Oh, real quick, come on in here, Matt. I just want to show the other seat. For anybody who's looking to shove a seat in somewhere, originally we had put a racing seat there, but it wasn't bolted to anything and the seat belts didn't work very well. This is a center seat out of a new Ford pickup truck. And the great part about it is that it actually has a built-in seat belt, bolts to the frame, and folds down flat so I can see over it, and only has a couple of bolts, and then I can take it out and put things in the back of this. So if you're looking for a seat, this took me a long time to figure out, those center seats work out great. They're not terribly wide, but it works great. The nitrous bottle, for those who are very observant, not functional, put in here by Matt just to freak people out, and it works great because everybody thinks we've got NOS on this old ambulance. So that's about it. That's our awesome Cannonball ambulance. I will do more videos as we kind of get it ready and go towing with it. I'm going to cover more of the cars other than the 928s in future videos. We'll get to the Audi Cannonball car and a few other ones. And of course, more big history videos. I'll be doing one of those a month. Those take a lot of work, so bear with me on the history videos. And if you like this video and you like the videos that I'm doing, please like and subscribe and tell your friends, and we'll grow the channel together. And, you know, I hope the road rises to you, and you have a great day. Thanks for watching.